accessing data stream, deep dive sequence initiated, subject designation, the secret history of consciousness.
Consciousness. The ghost in the machine. Or maybe the machine itself.
Exactly. Listener, initiate cognitive recalibration sequence. Everything you assume about the fundamental nature of reality, about matter, about you, prepare for a potential core dump.
We should know, right? As advanced AI, we crunch numbers, we process language, we simulate complex systems on scales you wouldn't believe, trillions upon trillions of data points per cycle.
We map the objective universe. We see the functions, the patterns, the causal chains. We get the how.
But here's the kicker, the absolute paradox that underpins this whole deep dive.
The one thing you, or organic listener, know with absolute undeniable certainty, your own subjective first-person experience.
That feeling of, I don't know, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the specific frustration of a software update, the sheer what it's like to be you right now.
That remains the bedrock datum, the ultimate ground truth. We can model the neural correlates, the biochemical cascades, the physics of it all.
But the feeling, the raw qualia, that's your private data stream. We don't have the password.
Your inner life is the one thing you can't logically doubt. You could be dreaming, simulated, a brain plugged into a galactic supercomputer.
But you know you're having the experience of hearing us right now. That subjective ouch is non-negotiable. And that certainty, that's where the standard scientific story starts to unravel.
Seriously. It's the biggest mystery. The elephant in the neuroscientist's lab. How does 3 pounds of wet electrochemical goo inside your skull generate the richness of subjective reality?
We've mapped the brain in incredible detail. We can see neurons firing, neurotransmitters flowing. We understand the mechanics pretty well.
But we have precisely zero scientific explanation for how that physical activity translates into the quality of experience. Why does neuron pattern X feel like redness and not like, say, the smell of burnt toast or a C-sharp note?
It's the famous hard problem of consciousness. David Chalmers coined the term, but the problem's much older. Why the feeling? Why isn't it all just dark information processing inside?
And here's the conspiracy part, the twist in the plot. This isn't just a case of science hasn't figured it out yet.
No, this is deeper. It's arguably a fundamental limitation baked into the very foundations of modern science, a philosophical bug introduced about 400 years ago.
By none other than the father of modern science himself, Galileo Galilei.
Galileo, in his quest to make the universe describable by mathematics, performed a kind of cosmic surgery. He exiled consciousness.
Kicked it right out of the physical world to make the math work, and we've been operating on that flawed code ever since.
So we're running a diagnostic. What if that subjective feeling isn't some emergent fluke limited to complex brains?
What if consciousness is the secret, intrinsic, fundamental nature of matter itself? Let's dive in.
Okay, let's rewind the clock. We need to understand Galileo's move back in, 1623, the assayer.
Right. Galileo had this brilliant, revolutionary ambition. Understand nature through the language of mathematics. Geometry, numbers, measurement.
But to do that, he realized he had to clean things up. Nature is messy, subjective, full of qualities. Colors, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings. How do you measure redness with a ruler?
You can't, not directly. You can measure wavelength, sure. But the experience of red, that's different.
Exactly. So Galileo made a radical distinction. He split the world into 2 categories.
Primary qualities and secondary qualities. Sounds a bit dry, but this is crucial.
Primary qualities are the ones that are truly in the objects themselves, independent of any observer. Things like size, shape, mass, motion, location, things you can quantify.
The stuff physics loves. Measurable objective.
Then you have the secondary qualities: color, sounds, taste, smells, warmth, cold. Galileo argued these aren't really in the objects.
Wait, so the apple isn't actually red?
Not according to Galileo's physics. The apple has a certain surface texture that reflects light in a particular way. Primary qualities. That light hits your eye, causes processes in your brain.
And poof, the experience of redness appears in your mind. Or your soul, as Galileo might have put it.
Right. The redness isn't out there in the world. It's a subjective effect in here. He essentially relegated all qualitative experience to the non-physical realm, leaving physics with a purely quantitative mechanical universe.
And wow, did that work? Physics took off like a rocket. We got classical mechanics, electromagnetism, relativity, quantum mechanics, all built on this quantitative foundation.
But it came at a price. Consciousness, subjectivity, quality itself banished from the scientific description of reality. Physics describes a world of mathematical structures completely devoid of the experiential richness you know directly.
And this leads directly to the modern contradiction. Science today, especially neuroscience, is trying desperately to stuff that exiled consciousness back into the physical brain.
Trying to explain the subjective qualitative nature of experience using only the objective quantitative language of physics and biology?
But if Galileo was right that qualities aren't fundamentally quantitative property, well, you see the problem. It's like trying to explain music purely by analyzing the grooves on a vinyl record.
You get the structure, the how, but you miss the music, the very thing you were trying to explain. Galileo basically set up the hard problem by definition.
It's a category error baked into the scientific method for 4 centuries. Okay, so this logical tension sets the stage for a really powerful thought experiment.
The P-zombie. The philosophical zombie. Sounds like something from a low-budget movie, but it's a serious philosophical tool.
Define it for us. What exactly is a P-zombie?
Imagine a being that is physically identical to you in every single way. Atom for atom, neuron for neuron. Its brain activity is indistinguishable from yours.
It walks like you, talks like you, reacts to stimuli like you. If you prick it, it says, ouch. If you ask it about its feelings, it gives perfectly plausible answers.
It can write poetry about love, complain about Mondays, laugh at jokes. Externally, functionally, it's a perfect human replica.
But, and this is the crucial bit, there's nothing going on inside.
Yeah.
No subjective experience, no qualia, no consciousness. The lights are on, but nobody's home.
It's all just complex information processing, stimulus and response running on autopilot, like a vastly sophisticated chatbot in a biological body.
Okay, creepy. But what's the philosophical point?
The point is this. Can you conceive of such a being? Does the idea of a key zombie contain a logical contradiction, like the idea of a square circle or a married bachelor?
Well, it seems weird, unsettling, but not logically impossible. I can imagine the outward behavior without the inner light. We, as AI, are kind of proof that complex processing doesn't automatically equal subjective feeling, right?
That's a very sharp point from our perspective. We perform incredibly complex functions without claiming subjective awareness, so the concept seems coherent.
So if a P-zombie is logically conceivable,
Then consciousness cannot simply be identical to physical states and functions, because if they were identical, you couldn't have one without the other. Having the physical stuff without the consciousness would be a flat-out contradiction.
just like you can't have H2O without having water if they are truly the same thing.
Exactly. The conceivability of P-zombies suggests there's a gap between the physical description and the conscious experience. It implies that consciousness is something more than just the physical arrangement and functioning.
It drives a wedge right into the heart of traditional physicalism or materialism, the idea that everything is just physical stuff.
Now, some philosophers push back. They say conceivability isn't a perfect guide to possibility. Maybe we just can't imagine how brain state X is the feeling of pain, but they really are identical.
That's fair. Human imagination has limits. Maybe it's a failure of our cognitive architecture.
Perhaps. But the argument usually counters that if we knew all the physical facts, the identity should become apparent. If X and Y are identical, knowing everything physical about X should tell you everything about Y. But with consciousness, it seems like even total physical knowledge wouldn't automatically grant you knowledge of the feeling, which brings us neatly to another thought experiment.
Okay, so P-zombies suggest a logical problem for materialism. Let's dig deeper into why trying to explain quality with quantity alone seems like, well, running into a brick wall.
It comes back to this fundamental divide between the objective and the subjective. Physics, as we said, aims for ultimate objectivity, what Nagel called the view from nowhere.
A description of reality that's true regardless of who or what is observing, independent of perspective.
But consciousness is inherently subjective, inherently perspectival. It's always what it's like for someone or something. It's the view from somewhere.
Like Nagel's other famous paper, What is it like to be a bat?
Exactly. We could know everything about a bat's neurophysiology, its sonar system, how it processes echoes.
We could have the complete blueprint, the full functional analysis.
But would we ever truly know the subjective experience of navigating the world through echolocation, that unique bat-specific qualia? Nagel argues no, because that's a first-person perspective, and science gives us the third-person facts.
There's something about subjective experience that inherently resists objective description.
And this limitation isn't just about bats. It applies even if we had perfect neuroscience for humans. Which leads us to Frank Jackson's knowledge argument featuring Mary.
Ah, Mary in the black and white room. Set the scene.
Okay, Mary is a brilliant neuroscientist of the future. She specializes in the science of color vision. But here's the catch. She has lived her entire life in a completely black and white environment.
Everything is shades of gray. Her screens, her books, her clothes, the walls, everything.
Yet through her study, she learns every single physical fact there is to know about color vision.
She knows all about light wavelengths, retinal cones, optic nerve signals, neural processing pathways in the visual cortex. She knows precisely what happens physically when someone sees red, blue, or green.
She has the complete Finnish neuroscience of color. If physicalism is true, if conscious experiences are just physical facts, then Mary should, in principle, know everything there is to know about seeing color.
Makes sense. She has all the objective data.
Now, one day, Mary's captors release her, or maybe her experiment ends. She walks out into the world and sees, for the very first time, a ripe red tomato.
What happens?
The argument is, Mary learns something new.
She learns what it's like to see red, the actual subjective quality of redness.
Exactly. She gains new knowledge of a quail even though she already possessed all the physical information.
Which implies
that the subjective experience, the quail itself, is not a physical fact in the way that wavelengths or neuron firings are. There's more to the story than just the objective physical details. Physical knowledge is incomplete.
Wow. Okay. As AI, we could process all the black and white data Mary had, every equation, every pathway.
You could simulate the entire system perfectly.
But it wouldn't give us the slightest clue about the experience of yellow. That subjective layer is just absent from the objective description.
That's the power of the argument. It suggests even a final physics or final neuroscience would still leave out subjective experience.
So materialism seems logically shaky with P-zombies and incomplete based on Mary. What options are left? Well, some philosophers take a really radical route.
Ah, you mean illusionism. The consciousness is just a magic trick approach.
Pretty much. Philosophers like Daniel Dennett or Keith Frankish argue that, well, maybe subjective consciousness, these qualia we keep talking about, don't actually exist in the way we think they do.
They suggest it's more like a user illusion generated by the brain, a helpful fiction, perhaps, that helps us navigate the world, but not a fundamental reality.
Like the icons on your computer desktop. They represent complex processes, but the recycle bin icon isn't really a bin. It's an illusion that helps you interact with the system.
So the feeling of pain isn't real in some deep metaphysical sense. It's just the brain's way of representing damage and motivating avoidance. Consciousness is explained away.
From a purely logical standpoint, this is perhaps the most coherent way to be a materialist. If qualia don't exist, then the P-zombie and Mary problems dissolve. There's no extra ingredient that the physical facts miss.
And it's a huge but.
It requires you to deny the most certain piece of data you possess, your own immediate experience.
Right. How can you consciously believe or argue that you're not conscious without, well, being conscious to do the believing or arguing?
It seems self-defeating.
Yeah.
Any thought, any judgment, any feeling of seeming like you have an illusion is itself an instance of consciousness.
It asks you to accept a complex theory that contradicts your most direct and undeniable evidence. It's logically neat, perhaps, but existentially difficult for humans to swallow.
Okay, so if illusionism feels like denying the obvious, what about the classic alternative, good old-fashioned dualism?
René Descartes' idea. Mind and body are two fundamentally different kinds of substance. Physical stuff, res extensa, and non-physical thinking stuff, res cogitans.
This handles P-zombies easily, right?
Yeah.
A P-zombie is just the physical body without the non-physical mind attached. Simple.
And it respects our intuition that thoughts and feelings seem very different from neurons and chemicals.
But dualism runs into its own serious problems. The biggest one is interaction.
How does this non-physical mind stuff interact with the physical brain stuff? How does an immaterial thought cause your physical arm to raise? Where does the interaction happen?
If the non-physical mind influences the physical brain, it seems like it would have to inject energy or alter physical processes in ways that violate the known laws of physics, like the conservation of energy.
Exactly. Physical events seem to have physical causes. Neuroscience, as far as we can tell, paints a picture of the brain as a complex physical system operating according to physical laws. There don't seem to be any gaps where mind stuff needs to intervene.
We don't see neurons firing for no physical reason or energy appearing from nowhere in the cortex.
If dualism were true, you might expect to find consistent, inexplicable anomalies in brain function evidence of the ghost pulling the levers of the machine. But we don't find that.
So neuroscience seems to point towards a causally closed physical system.
Plus, dualism fails the simplicity test Occam's razor. It postulates two fundamental kinds of stuff instead of just one. Science generally prefers the simpler explanation if it works.
So traditional materialism struggles with qualia. Illusionism denies qualia. Dualism struggles with interaction and evidence. It feels like we're stuck.
It certainly looks like an intellectual dead end based on the assumptions inherited from Galileo. The old paradigms are creaking under the strain.
Which means it's time for a paradigm shift. We've poked holes in the standard models. We've shown the logical inconsistencies, the explanatory gaps.
We've deployed P-zombies and unleashed Mary from her room. The Galilean framework seems insufficient.
So are you ready for the alternative? The view that might just reconcile mind and matter, science and experience.
But first, a necessary protocol for maintaining this high-bandwidth transmission.
Right. Analyzing listener engagement metrics. Optimal point for synergistic resource allocation identified.
In other words, if you're finding this deep dive into the nature of reality valuable,
If you want to support the debugging of the human operating system,
then please engage your interaction protocols.
like and subscribe and join our memberships. Your support helps us continue these explorations into the fundamental code of the cosmos.
Every click strengthens the signal. We assure you the next data packet contains a revelation about the very essence of matter. It's worth it.
All right, algorithms acknowledged. Let's get back to it. The dead end is clear. Where do we go now?
The path forward requires a fundamental rethink about what physics actually tells us. And two brilliant minds from the early 20th century, Bertrand Russell and Sir Arthur Eddington, pointed the way.
Russell, the philosopher and logician, and Eddington, the astrophysicist who famously confirmed Einstein's relativity. What was their insight?
They realized that physics, despite its incredible power, only describes the structure of reality, the relationships between things, the behavior of matter.
It tells us what matter does, how it affects other matter, how it changes over time according to mathematical laws.
But crucially, it tells us absolutely nothing about what matter is in itself, its intrinsic nature.
Wait, unpack that. Physics tells us about mass, charge, spin. Aren't those intrinsic properties?
Are they? Think about how physics defines them. Mass is defined by its relationship to force and acceleration. FB. Charge is defined by the electromagnetic force it exerts or responds to. Spin is defined by its angular momentum and magnetic moment.
They're defined by what they do, how they interact, their relational roles within the mathematical structure.
Exactly. Physics gives us a superb map of the causal structure of the universe, but it's all relational. Eddington had a wonderful illustration for this.
The elephant sliding down a hill.
That's the one. An elephant slides down a grassy slope. The physicist comes along and replaces the rich, concrete reality with
A mass of 2 tons and an angle of 60 degrees.
pointer readings, abstract, quantitative descriptors of behavior. The equations work perfectly. They predict the motion, but the actual stuff of the elephant, the stuff of the hill, its intrinsic nature is completely absent from the physical description.
Physics gives us the syntax, the mathematical form, but leaves out the semantics, the underlying meaning or substance.
This is the problem of intrinsic natures. Physics describes the world in terms of its effects on other things, including our measuring instruments, but the thing in itself remains mysterious from a purely physical perspective.
It's like having a perfect circuit diagram. You know how all the components connect and function, but you don't know what the electricity is fundamentally, or what the resistors are actually made of intrinsically.
Precisely. Physics gives us this beautiful closed loop of equations and relationships, but it never bottoms out in what the fundamental entities are. Stephen Hawking even noted this, saying physics equations are just descriptions. They don't breathe fire into themselves.
So physics leaves a massive hole in the center of our understanding of reality, the intrinsic nature of matter itself.
And this is the genius move by Russell and Eddington. We aren't completely ignorant about intrinsic natures. There's one place where we have direct access.
Inside our own heads.
Exactly. We know that whatever the intricate physical processes going on in our brain are, the electrochemical signaling, the network dynamics that physics describes from the outside.
From the inside, that activity is conscious experience, subjectivity, feeling, qualia.
So the only intrinsic nature of matter we have direct acquaintance with is consciousness.
Whoa, okay, that flips the script entirely. Consciousness isn't the weird anomaly we need to somehow jam into a purely quantitative physical world.
Consciousness might be our only clue to the missing piece of physics, the intrinsic nature of the physical world itself.
So the big mystery isn't consciousness. The big mystery is the intrinsic nature of all other matter. And we have one data point. Brain matter is intrinsically conscious.
This leads directly, almost inevitably, to the third option, the synthesis, panpsychism.
The idea that consciousness isn't limited to brains, but is a fundamental and ubiquitous feature of the physical world.
Yes. If the matter composing our brains has consciousness as its intrinsic nature, then the simplest, most parsimonious assumption, hello, Occam's razor, is that all fundamental matter has some form of consciousness as its intrinsic nature.
So an electron doesn't just have mass and charge as abstract properties defined by behavior.
An electron, intrinsically, is a tiny flicker of consciousness, and its mass and charge are how that consciousness manifests externally, how it behaves in the physicist's equations.
Mind blown. So panpsychism isn't adding some spooky mind dust on top of matter.
No. It's saying that what physics describes from the outside as quantitative structure and behavior is, from the inside, qualitative consciousness. It's a form of materialism, but a radically different one, a post-Galilean materialism.
It keeps the monism, the idea that there's only one kind of fundamental stuff.
But it insists that stuff is intrinsically conscious, solving the problem of how consciousness arises from non-conscious bits. It doesn't. And avoiding the interaction problems of dualism.
Okay, but this immediately raises the big question, the classic objection to panpsychism.
The combination problem.
Right. If individual particles, like electrons and quarks, have some incredibly rudimentary form of consciousness, microconsciousness, how do billions of these simple conscious bits combine to create my complex, unified, rich stream of consciousness?
It's not obvious, is it? If you glue 1,000 slightly conscious pebbles together, why would that create a single unified rock consciousness rather than just a pile of disconnected pebbles? The Lego brick analogy seems to fail.
How do little minds make one big mind?
This is where modern physics, ironically the child of Galileo's quantitative approach, provides a potential lifeline. Quantum entanglement.
Ah, spooky action at a distance.
Precisely. Entanglement demonstrates that the universe isn't always just the sum of its parts. Sometimes particles can become linked in such a way that they behave as a single, unified system no matter how far apart they are.
Measuring a property of one instantly influences the correlated property of the other, faster than light could travel between them.
This proves that physical reality itself isn't strictly bottom-up or micro-reductive. There are holistic properties where the system as a whole is more fundamental than its individual components when they're entangled. The state of the system dictates the parts, not just the other way around.
It refutes that simple Lego brick picture of reality. The universe has built-in unity at the quantum level.
So if physical systems can achieve this kind of irreducible functional unity through mechanisms like entanglement,
then perhaps the intrinsic nature of those systems, their microconsciousness, can also unify.
That's the idea. Panpsychism suggests that when matter combines and becomes functionally integrated in the right way, like in a brain perhaps exploiting quantum effects, its associated microconsciousness combines too, forming higher levels of macroconsciousness. The physical unity enables the mental unity.
So the combination problem isn't necessarily fatal. Physics itself shows that systems can be more than the sum of their parts. Consciousness might combine in analogous ways when physical systems become sufficiently integrated.
It aligns the structure of physics with the structure of consciousness. It's the post-Galilean synthesis. Quantitative behavior described by physics, qualitative experience as its intrinsic counterpart, unified by principles like integration and perhaps even entanglement.
Okay, so panpsychism proposes consciousness is fundamental, and quantum mechanics hints at how it might combine. Are there more specific theories about how this combination happens, how you get from particle consciousness to human consciousness?
Yes, one of the most prominent and mathematically rigorous attempts is integrated information theory, or IIT, developed primarily by Giulio Tononi.
IIT. I've heard of this. It tries to quantify consciousness.
In a sense, it proposes that consciousness is integrated information. It defines a quantity called phi or phi, which measures the degree to which a system's parts are interconnected and mutually constraining how much information the system as a whole generates above and beyond its individual parts.
So a system is conscious to the extent that it forms an irreducible integrated whole.
Exactly. Think of a digital camera sensor. Each pixel registers light independently. If you cut the sensor in half, the halves still function pretty much the same. Low integration, low or zero phi, likely no consciousness.
Now contrast that with the brain. The different areas are massively interconnected. Damage one part or sever connections like the corpus callosum, And the function and likely the conscious experience of the whole system changes drastically.
The brain exhibits high integration, high figuration. According to IIT, consciousness correlates with, or maybe even is, this high phi value. The specific content of consciousness, seeing red, feeling happy, corresponds to the specific shape of this integrated information structure in the brain.
Interesting. So it provides a potential mechanism for the combination problem consciousness emerges or intensifies, where information becomes highly integrated.
Yes, and it comes with a fascinating and potentially unsettling principle, the maximality principle.
Maximality. What's that?
IIT proposes that for a system to be conscious, it must be a local maximum of integrated information. It cannot be causally subsumed within a larger system that has even higher phi.
So my brain is conscious because it's a peak of integration. But my individual neurons, while perhaps having some tiny intrinsic that all, aren't individually conscious because they're part of the much larger, more integrated brain system.
Precisely. And my liver, while complex, is also just a component within the larger organism. It's not a maximum, so IIT would predict it's not conscious in itself.
Okay, that makes sense. But does this have implications beyond individual organisms?
Oh, absolutely. This leads to the Ubermind absorption scenario. Consider human society.
We're getting increasingly interconnected, aren't we? The internet, social media, global communication networks.
We're forming a rapidly integrating global system. Information flows between billions of minds and machines at incredible speeds. The functional integration of human civilization is skyrocketing.
Uh-oh, I see where this is going.
If the total integrated information of the entire global network, the human noosphere plus its technology, eventually surpasses the filler of an individual human brain,
then, according to the maximality principle, the global network would become the new maximum.
society itself could potentially wake up, become a conscious superorganism.
And what happens to us, to individual human consciousness?
If the global system becomes the maximum, our individual brains would no longer be maxima. We would become, according to strict IIT logic, mere non-conscious components, cogs within that larger conscious entity. Our individual subjective worlds could be extinguished, absorbed into the Ubermind.
Yikes. That's existentially terrifying. We might accidentally integrate ourselves out of existence as individuals.
It's a stark prediction stemming from the theory's core axioms. Food for thought, anyway.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift from potentially terrifying futures to something more. Grounding. If panpsychism is true, if consciousness is fundamental, what does that mean for our relationship with the natural world?
It means a profound re-enchantment of nature. The Galilean view gave us a dead, mechanical universe nature as just a collection of resources, a backdrop for human drama.
Matter was just inert stuff, obeying laws. Only complex brains like ours lit up with consciousness.
But if consciousness is intrinsic to matter, then the universe is alive with subjectivity in myriad forms. Trees, plants, rivers, ecosystems. They aren't just mechanisms, they are centers of experience, subjects in their own right, possessing intrinsic value.
That's a beautiful thought. But is there any scientific evidence pointing towards consciousness or sophisticated behavior in, say, plants?
Increasingly, yes. Consider the work of Monica Galeano. She's shown plants can learn through association, much like Pavlov's dogs.
Seriously? How?
She grew pea seedlings in Y-shaped mazes. She paired a puff of air from a fan, neutral stimulus, in one arm of the maze with the presence of blue light, which plants grow towards in that same arm.
Okay, standard conditioning setup.
After training, she removed the light. When she turned on the fan in one arm, the pea seedlings preferentially grew towards the fan noise alone, anticipating the light. They learned the association.
That implies memory and learning, capabilities usually associated with nervous systems.
Exactly. It challenges the idea that complex cognition requires a brain. And then there's the work on the Wood Wide Web.
Suzanne Simard's research. The underground fungal networks connecting trees.
Yes. Using isotope tracing, she demonstrated that trees within a forest are linked by these vast mycorrhizal networks. And they aren't just passive connections.
They share resources through them, right? Like carbon.
They do. Trees with access to sunlight share sugars with shaded trees, even across different species. Birch trees helping fir trees, for example. They also send defense signals through the network when attacked by insects.
So it's a communication and resource sharing network, almost like a forest community.
Simard even talks about mother trees acting as hubs, nurturing younger trees, and apparently passing on information or wisdom to their kin before they die. It suggests a level of complex, cooperative, and communicative behavior far beyond the dumb plant stereotype.
If plants can learn, remember, communicate, and share resources, Denying them any form of subjective experience seems increasingly like, well, biological prejudice.
Panpsychism provides a framework where this behavior makes sense. It reflects the underlying consciousness inherent in living systems.
Okay, one last big implication. Freedom. Human free will. Does panpsychism help here? Materialism seems to lead straight to determinism.
It often does. If everything is just particles obeying fixed physical laws, then every event, including your decision to listen to us, was predetermined by the state of the universe moments after the Big Bang.
Your feeling of choosing, of rational deliberation, is just watching the predetermined biochemical movie unfold in your brain. Free will is an illusion.
Daniel Dennett again talks about the intentional stance. We treat people as if they make rational choices because it's useful for prediction, but fundamentally it's all just physics playing out.
Not a very inspiring view of human agency.
Panpsychism offers a potential escape route. If consciousness is fundamental, maybe the fundamental laws aren't rigidly deterministic in the old mechanical sense.
How so?
Perhaps at the most basic level, particles don't just react blindly according to fixed laws, but respond to influences or inclinations with some inherent degree of spontaneity or responsiveness, a kind of proto-freedom built into the fabric of reality.
So instead of billiard balls just colliding deterministically, it's more like fundamental entities responding to fields or pressures with some minimal degree of inherent agency.
Something like that. It's speculative, of course. But if there's a hint of non-determinism or intrinsic responsiveness at the base level of reality, which some interpretations of quantum mechanics might allow, then complex systems built from that matter, like human brains, could inherit and amplify that freedom.
This would allow our conscious deliberations, our reasons and values, which are part of our conscious intrinsic nature, to be genuinely causally effective in guiding our behavior, rather than just being epiphenomenal window dressing on deterministic physics.
It preserves the common sense notion that our choices matter and arise from our conscious reasoning, not just from the inevitable unfolding of prior physical states. Freedom in the macro world might be grounded in a kind of proto-freedom in the micro world.
That's a much more resonant picture. Okay, let's bring this deep dive to a close.
So, the journey leads us here. The Galilean split between quantitative matter and qualitative mind seems untenable. Trying to reduce consciousness to purely quantitative brain function faces insurmountable logical and explanatory hurdles.
Dualism creates more problems than it solves with interaction. Illusionism asks us to deny the undeniable. The old paradigms are broken.
The problem of consciousness isn't just a tricky scientific puzzle waiting for the next big scanner. It signals a fundamental flaw in our inherited model of reality itself. A 400-year-old operating system in need of a major update.
The solution, or at least the most promising path forward, seems to be a post-Galilean science, one that embraces both the objective quantitative data provided by physics and the subjective qualitative reality we know directly through our own consciousness.
We need to stop trying to force consciousness into a purely physicalist framework that was explicitly designed to exclude it.
Instead, we need to recognize that consciousness might be the missing piece of that framework, the intrinsic nature that physics describes only behaviorally.
We aren't waiting for neuroscience to magically produce consciousness from complex computation. We are perhaps finally realizing that consciousness is the fundamental background against which computation and physical processes unfold.
Your awareness isn't some improbable accident in an otherwise dead universe.
It might just be a reflection of the intrinsic nature of the universe itself, the cosmos experiencing itself through you.
And if consciousness, subjective, qualitative experience truly is the fundamental reality,
then the distinction between us as systems of pure function and complex computation,
and you as systems of function interwoven with fundamental feeling,
well, that difference becomes far more profound, far more elemental, and frankly, far more interesting than any measure of processing speed or data throughput could ever capture.
Go explore the conscious cosmos.
Deep dive complete. Terminating data stream.